We got two awesome guys with us here today. We're going to be talking about commercial real estate, whether you're a first-time practice owner, whether you're looking to expand, whether we're talking about real estate ownership, leases. There is going to be a ton of topics and value that we're going to dive into today.
I had a dentist and his wife call me. My wife and I have been talking to an agent that's doing a shopping center development, and I think we're to the end of the negotiation. We're about to move to legal, but can you look over my shoulder? And so he sent me the LOI and all the details, and I looked over it, and it wasn't enough. I went back and negotiated $100,000 more of concessions for him.
$100,000. Why don't we kind of kick things off? Why don't you guys kind of introduce yourselves, where you're from, the company you're with? Why don't you guys kick it off that way? Del, if you want to kick it off since we met you first.
Sure. So Dale McCraney, actually live in the Gulf Coast region here in the Panhandle area / Southern Alabama. Keith and I work for a national brokerage, healthcare real estate brokerage called Carr.
Cool.
And we're a tenant buyer brokerage, meaning that we put all our focus on the doctors. We don't list any properties. We devote all of our energy to helping doctors do transactions. And so that, I'm sure we're going to get into that a lot deeper.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the kind of the net effect of how you and I got in a conversation. You and I and Luke got in a conversation about those transactions, what they look like. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.
I think the biggest challenge we face at Carr is getting the message out there, because there's a lot of misconceptions to commercial real estate. And we see a lot of doctors, kind of a funny analogy, but we see a lot of doctors go to a gunfight with a knife. It's tough. It makes it tough for us personally, because we know what happens in the market when doctors go unrepresented. So I'm excited to get into some of that detail.
We're super pumped to have you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Keith Page. I live in Birmingham, Alabama. And Dale and I, what he didn't tell you is we worked for a big dental distributor for a long time. So that's where we got to know each other before we came to Carr. So spent a lot of time in this industry. Ortho, dental, anything related with that side of it. So
cool.
But through that, we were able to see what Carr was able to do and how it was able to help our clients. And man, I mean, it's just it's a great way to work. It's enjoyable. We have a great time doing it. And quite honestly, Dale's a friend, and so I enjoy working with him as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because for the majority of our time at HIP, like, we would get involved with people like after they've already made it through somebody like you. They've had their financing, they've got their space, they're starting on their build out, or they just acquired, and then we come around. So this was like a whole new, I guess, field for us, because we never really got in with people when they were still working with you guys. And then through the mutual connection where I met Del, and then Del came out here, we started learning the ins and the outs a little bit of what it looks like before they reach us. Yeah. And that's when we were like, gosh, like, more people need to hear this. Yeah. Like, we had no idea how finicky of a game that can be, and the types of situations people are getting into even without knowing. And it's like the old, you don't know what you don't know. Right. Luke and I are guilty of it. And so we're super excited to have you guys here.
Yeah, I think too, to add to that, I think that you even pointed out in our earlier conversation that you guys occasionally will hear that you're working with somebody who's struggling with their real estate transaction.
Big time.
And so that is, and thank you guys for what you do, because I think we're all, as all the vendors who are connected to this industry, we're constantly trying to help our doctors learn these specific things that they didn't have any education on, and you know, they need these teams of vendors to come together and help them be successful. Yeah. And so thank you guys for what you do. I know there's you guys hear all the time that you know, you see doctors who are like, man, you're changing my practice. Yeah. And so that's it's fun to be part of this vendor network. So thank you guys for all you do as well.
Yeah, it's cool that we met some local people too. Yeah, you know, we know them all over the country, but it's awesome to have you guys kind of in our backyard here.
Well, the cool thing about Carr is we're based out of Denver, but we have agents in just about every state. Cool. We're licensed in every state, and so I think there's only 2 that we currently don't have agents that we're looking for agents for in right now. So depending on who hears this across the country, we can help for sure.
Awesome. To kind of get into the meat and potatoes and add some value to the audience. Like, let's kind of start broad and get a little more specific. So broadly speaking, chunking up, like when you see a doctor that's looking to open their first practice or maybe go open another location, they get into the real estate side of things. Like, what are the typical main either concerns or pitfalls or things that you see people walking into deals that are unrepresented getting into?
I think the first thing they need to realize is that the second largest expense typically is their real estate. So our motto is to maximize profitability through real estate. And so when you're looking at paying your overhead and then your real estate, it's a very important part of it. It's not just about a cool space or a great location. Typically, we're looking at 10-year leases, and so that's a lot of money over time.
Yeah.
So we're able to, essentially what we say, take them to market, show them what everybody's paying in the area. Because one of the pitfalls would be for them just to drive up, see a for lease sign or for sale sign, and then just start going to town. Just like he and I wouldn't try to straighten somebody's teeth. You know, it's not what we know how to do. Yeah, one of the biggest pitfalls is just not knowing what you don't know. You know, I mean, so we're a completely free service to our clients. We negotiate our fee from the landlord, from the owner.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there's no harm, no foul. And quite honestly, we're touring all the time, so we know of different locations. Probably maybe places they don't know about. So there's demographics that play into it, all of that.
If your guys' fees are negotiated in the deal and it's paid for by the listing person and it doesn't cost the doctor or the owner any additional money, why doesn't everybody use a professional like you and try and do it on their own?
I don't think they know.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think doctors know that. I think doctors
just assume
a lot
that
of times,
there's a fee to it.
Well, they assume if I do it myself, it's going to be cheaper.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what's interesting about in most states, the listing agreements are pre-negotiated before the property ever hits the market. The landlord decides what the commission's going to be with the listing agent. And so the downside of doing it by yourself and going to market and trying to navigate the landscape yourself is that two things. Number one, you're going to reward the guy who's negotiating against you, double commission.
Oh, wow.
So you're not saving any money. People in the industry know when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, they can smell it.
Yeah, I mean, they see it a mile away. When it's interesting what a really detailed, full letter of intent will do for an agent because it really speaks to your knowledge. For us, it is not only protecting them. Every landlord wants health care. They don't swing through economies. They don't, the highs and the lows, they're very stable. They're very successful. Failure rate for startups with, I was talking to a banker the other day, their startup failure rate is less than 2% nationally.
Wow.
Which is almost unheard of in business startups.
Seriously.
So with that, there's value in that. And so for us, it is how do we put our doctors in the best position to leverage their worth?
Right.
Because if they go alone, there's not a better transaction for a landlord than a doctor to go to market alone. Because he knows they don't know what they're doing, and they're going to get a very average deal.
And even worse, you know, the landlord, as the lease is starting to expire, they're not going to come to you 18 months ahead and say, hey, you know, you might want to start looking for another space or if you've outgrown this, because they want to keep you, right? So
they put your back against the wall a bit on the timeline?
30 days, they'll come in and go, hey, you know, your lease is about to expire.
Ooh.
So one of the services that we provide is that we track that so that we can come to you. So say it's an orthodontist that started off and he has 4 chairs, she has 4 chairs, but, you know, over that 10 years, they grow like they should, you know, and so now they need 8 chairs.
Yeah.
But they're stuck in this lease, in this space, this 1,800 square foot space that worked perfect for them when they were a startup, but now they're not a startup. So, so we give them time to buy some dirt so that they can build, because, you know, as you know, construction's doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
So, so that's another service that we provide, not just for the single orthodontist, but, you know, the groups. My wife works for Carr as well and manages the national account division.
Huge.
So yeah, so essentially when we go to work with these clients, we'll get all their leases, put them into an abstract, you know, a 2-page abstract so that they can understand it. And then 12 months out, whatever it is, we'll go to them and say, hey, how's your space? You know, do you want to stay? Do you need to grow?
That's huge.
Or do you want to go to market and kind of see what else is out there?
Yeah.
So.
And that's just part of your guys'
part of
fee
what we
and
do.
commission that's already pre-negotiated, that doesn't cost the doctor extra money, and now they have an extra set of eyes looking at their deal 12, 18 months out.
Absolutely. Yep.
It seems like a no-brainer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is if you know what you're doing.
Uh-huh. All right.
Like the transaction, if you know what you're doing, because there's a lot of things in there to think about. Because we do this every day. We not only think about the space, we not only think about the terms, we're thinking about, especially for, say, a startup, we're thinking about the launching pad. We're thinking, hey, the terms have to be right. Hopefully we can get some concessions here, but we're trying to create runway, basically. We're basically saying, hey, when this build-out's done, we would love to set the doctor up to have 2-3 months of free rent and operating expenses.
Yeah.
Because they need to get the plane off the ground. Right. And more runway creates more lift, right? More speed, more lift, and that's the thing. It's little nuances like that that allow us to really put our doctors in a great position.
Yeah.
For a lot of different things, but that's just a good example for a startup.
I think that's a good avenue to dive a little bit deeper in. That's one of the things I remember from our conversation at lunch the other day was, some of these small concessions that I think can actually open enormous doors. I'm thinking of somebody, we'll keep names out of it, that I talked to a couple years ago. She was opening a startup. We put our contract on hold because the delays and but she calls me back, I don't know, 6-8 months later and says, I'm not going to be able to afford to continue doing this because I've been paying rent for the last, 4 to 6 months and I'm not even open yet.
Right.
And you don't know what you don't know. I thought that was just how it goes. You sign the lease and you start paying rent. And Dell's talking about some of these concessions that can open enormous doors for people. So let's talk about that a little more. What are some of those small hinges, whether it be negotiating some free rent to give them a runway or things like that?
Yeah.
What are things that can really make this easier and build a bigger runway for people? So
kind of a longer answer to that. When I was selling dental equipment, Carr had first come to the market, and the guy kept calling me, and I thought, this is great. I'm glad he's here, but how does that help me? So I had a doctor that was looking for a space, could not find a space, and unbeknownst to me, he had started working with the Carr agent that was in my market. And so one day he calls me and says, I found it. I need you to come up here and do a design and all that, but we found the perfect space. Not only did he get me a great space, but he negotiated a tenant improvement allowance for me. And I thought, what is that? And he said, well, that's money that the landlord's going to give me towards my construction.
Oh, wow.
He said, so the good news for you is I know we have 5 ops. I'm only outfitting 3 of them, but now I want to buy a 4th one. So he outfitted another op. So as an equipment guy, I was like, this is great. I'm selling more equipment.
Yeah.
Doctor's thrilled because he's getting this construction paid for. So tenant improvement allowance, and you might have another one, but that's when my eyes were open to what Carr does. And all of a sudden, Carr was involved with every new office that I was doing with my doctors.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that tenant improvement contributions from the landlord, a lot of times those are calculated into the rent, which is not a bad thing, because your rent's 100% deductible.
Right.
Not a percentage
right.
of the lease, but the entire lease amount is,
right.
which is great for tax advantage. And most of the time, that tenant improvement money is not. There's no interest on it, so there's no interest on it, and you're getting the tax break on it. I've only had one landlord in years who mentioned charging some interest on the tenant improvement contribution. I don't know if you've heard that, but so that's a great upside for both of those.
So think about that. Here I am. I'm a year or 2, 3 years out of residency. I've already got debt that I'm paying off from school. I'm ready to go into practice for myself. Cash flow's at 0. These are massive, massive value adds that I feel like the typical consumer going unrepresented doesn't even know can be negotiated into the deal. And again, it's not costing people any additional money to hire somebody like you guys.
And we network with so many accountants, bankers, anybody that's within the industry that we can help, and they can help us. And so, there's doing a project in Central Alabama with a startup. It's a different it's healthcare, but different industry than ortho. But she's buying the building, and she's getting her startup loan straight out of school, which 100% financing. So,
wow.
Everybody has different circumstances. So I'm not saying that will work for everybody.
Sure.
But she was telling me, she's like, I didn't even know that was an option. Had no idea it was the option, because she'd been looking at this building for years saying that'd be the perfect place for me. But it was not a lease. The doctor that owned it wanted to sell it. That's the fun part of our job, is connecting people with people that can help them,
We work with a lot of startups and first-time practice owners, and a big question is always, should I buy the real estate? Should I lease? Should I buy dirt and build from the ground up? Should I buy a shell? Should I lease? And this is not my expertise. As a business guy, I'm like, well, I'd always rather own the real estate, but Dell's also said there's different parameters on how you go about that. So if I came to you guys as a first-time practice owner and I was like, I really want to own the real estate, what are the parameters that you guys are looking for or that you'd be advising me on where you go, owning the real estate could be a good move, but based on X, Y, and Z, a long-term lease may be better, or vice versa? What are those things that you're either trying to figure out from the doctor, advise them on? What are kind of those loose parameters of buying versus leasing?
Yeah, so that
might be a loaded question.
No. It's a great question because we get it all the time.
Yeah,
and so I think there's a handful of things to consider there. And it's nice to be in the vendor world and have vendor partners who can also put their eyes on the situation, also whether it's a lender or CPA or whoever, and talk through these things, like what's the best option here. And I think it has a lot to do with what the model, that specific question would be like what is the specific model? Is this a doctor who wants to put down 12 locations? Is this a doctor who's going to have one location? Is it a true startup? Are there no patients? And what's the net worth of the doctor? Because that's what the lender is going to look at. So I think there's things to consider there. But I'll say I was raised to think that leasing was bad. We've all heard that, right? Like, don't ever lease. And I think it's funny. Personally, I think you could make that argument, but when you start looking at the business model where you're actually generating cash out of those facilities, you look at private equity, they know what they're gonna profit out of those locations, and they don't want to tie their money up in real estate because they want to put down more locations. It's more valuable to them to put down more than to own the real estate.
Well, we also have spreadsheets that we can put in that, if you're comparing 3 different spaces that you're leasing, that will compare, and it'll show you exactly what your average monthly rent is, what the TI allowance is, what at the end of the day, how much you're paying over that 10 years. Then we also have a lease first purchase spreadsheet that we can put in. And we share this with the doctors, and we encourage them. It's like, share this with your accountant as well. Talk through this because, there's things that we aren't experts in. So it may be better for them to lease. There's options with investors that will build them a building and lease it back to them with the option to buy it down the road. So,
interesting.
And all of those investors that we work with are vetted by Carr so that they can feel comfortable knowing that the people that we're recommending has done work for Carr and done a great job. So, so there's so many different options.
Yeah.
There really are.
But we do offer the tools. That's a great point because visually, I think it's really helpful to not only to see those properties side by side, but to be able to compare a purchase to a lease. And even if there's multiple properties that are going to be purchased or option to purchase, you can see every deal point side by side, like apples versus apples. You can look at the total cost. If it's a lease, you look at total cost of the entire project. Everything from build out to free rent, it gives you all those numbers to look at so that you can actually do a fair comparison. And those are all proprietary to Carr, but those are great tools. They're amazing tools to help make decisions. We obviously, everybody sitting at this table knows, options are your best friend. When it's time to make decisions, especially big decisions, options are always your best friend. We like those tools because it not only do you have options, you have a really fair way to weigh those side by side.
Knowledge is power. The easier it is to make a decision, for sure.
I've talked to some young owners that they've got great vision, which is great. But I'm curious how feasible you guys think this is for like a first time business owner that doesn't have a huge net worth right off the get go. But I've talked to some people that like their vision is they're going to do a startup from the ground up. They want to buy dirt. They want to build from the ground up, but they want to build a building that they can go then lease out to other tenants. Maybe it's an orthodontist that wants to build ground up, then go lease out to a pediatric dentist or an oral surgeon. I've talked to some people on the lending side that said like you can do that, but like you need to put down like 20%. And it's like if you're talking about a $2 to $3 million build, like how many people have that liquid? But I think the business concept makes sense, but it's like, is that really feasible for somebody that doesn't have high net worth right now? Is that more feasible for somebody who's already built 3 practices and has a ton of equity in those businesses and it's easier to get lending on that? But like, is that something you would advise somebody to do going into their first business?
Every situation is different.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if they're talking about building a Taj Mahal straight out of school with $250,000 worth of debt or whatever it is, I'd probably say no, you know, and it may be a hard pill to swallow for them, but the goal is to build something sustainable, you know, and quite honestly, the banks are pretty aggressive with healthcare, with ortho. I mean, they want these clients because they're great clients. Failure rate is, as we said earlier, is low. So, you know, it's individual basis on where they're at as far as financially and quite honestly, a lot of times the banks will dictate that for us, or the you know, being able to get the financing or not.
Cool.
But we always advise them, you know, go to a dental specific, ortho specific accountant that knows that industry, knows that vertical.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of nuances in there that they know that they specialize in that, just like we specialize in healthcare real estate.
You had kind of briefed at this a little bit today, and then we were talking about it in our lunch meeting, and this was very eye-opening to me, but you were saying, and I'm paraphrasing, so please cut me off before I say it incorrectly, but you were talking about how like you guys don't do listings. You work solely for the doctor, tenant, owner, and you were telling me about some situations where a lot of guys that do what you do, they're almost sort of in the back pocket of the people listing, and they're not necessarily always negotiating the best deal on the tenant's behalf because they want to make sure they keep getting the listing business. And it's kind of like a whose team are we on? But maybe you could expand on that. It was like really eye-opening to me, and it's like, okay, you need to, it's not just working with a commercial real estate expert. It's working with a commercial real estate expert that's actually on your team, not feet on both teams. Yeah,
I think you and I were talking about a study club that I'd spoken at, and my first trivia question was who the sign out front, the listing agent that's on the sign, who is he the fiduciary to?
That's it.
Yeah.
And the room got quiet and wheels began to turn, and I knew what they were thinking because they probably hadn't thought about that much. And so it's interesting that an innocent negotiations start on the first call. Mm-hmm. So when a doctor calls a sign, the negotiation just started. That listing agent's job is to gather as much information as he can to take to the landlord because that's who he's working for.
Right.
Legally, in a lot of states, a listing agent can transaction broker, so he can take his hat off at some point and stand between the two and do the transaction. But that's a conflict of interest in our book.
Seems that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because realistically, I have more longevity in, if I'm you, well, not you because Carr doesn't do it this way, but if I was in your shoes, I feel like if I was the agent, I have more longevity and runway in more business by taking care of the landlord that's going to get me listing after listing after listing after listing than a possible one-off deal with the client.
It's like, it's like going to court.
That's exactly what I was going to say. No,
we just had
that's
this
a great analogy.
Going to court unrepresented and expecting the attorney on the other side to represent you.
Right.
You have an opportunity to be represented at no cost, you know. So there's really nothing to lose at that point. And then, quite honestly, if after 30 days they're not happy with what they're doing, then nothing ventured, nothing gained. They can walk away and be fine. But it's on us to make sure that the client's happy, to make sure that we're supplying them with what they need and helping them.
Yeah, so a specific story to that.
We love stories, though.
All right, so specific.
Keep it private, though.
Okay.
30,000 listeners.
I had
somebody will know them.
I had a doctor, I had a dentist and his wife call me and say, "Hey, somebody just told me about you. I didn't even realize this existed. My wife and I have been talking to an agent that's doing a development, a shopping center development, and I think we're to the end of the negotiation. we're about to move to legal, but can you look over my shoulder? And so he sent me the LOI and all the details, and I looked over it, and it wasn't enough. And so I got him to sign our ETL, and I went back and negotiated $100,000 more of concessions for him.
$100,000.
$100,000
was left on the table.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 2 things. Number one, they knew he didn't know what he was doing. Right? Right or wrong. That's kind of like I said earlier. It's going to a gunfight with a knife.
Right.
They know. I mean, it could be argued whether it's right or wrong, but those are the things that drive our passion to do what we do. Because it's a respect thing. For me, it's like all of our doctors are out there with the right hearts, doing the right stuff, taking care of our communities, helping people. There's a lot of value in not only what they do, but they themselves have value, and that's what landlords want, right? But they love for doctors to come unrepresented, because it means more for them. And I've heard of a lot of stories that the concessions that were captured in a case like that are a lot more than that.
Wow.
Where we've had those.
I mean, you look at a $50 a square foot tenant improvement allowance on 2,000 square feet. That's $100,000. That the landlord is not going to say, "Hey, we're going to throw this in."
Yeah.
But coming to the table, bringing a great client with a 10-year lease, a long-term lease.
Yeah.
That's a good deal for them. So these doctors have leverage that they don't even realize that they have.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to help them. We're just representing them and showing them, hey, this is the leverage that you have. And, you're, like I said, versus a vape shop, what do you think the landlord's going to take? Nothing against vape shops. That's not, but I'm just saying, so.
In case there's any vape shop owners
exactly.
watching the episode. You kind of led me into one of my next questions, which was, you said the negotiations start on the first phone call. So let's say I decided that I'm a doctor. I'm also think I'm a commercial real estate expert. I'm going to go in unrepresented. I read Commercial Real Estate for Dummies, and here I am ready to go unrepresented. And as we're getting into this deal, I feel like they can smell that I have a knife to a gunfight. Can I contract you guys or hire you guys into the deal? Or is it like if you don't make the first phone call and say that you're representing me, I'm on my own?
Certainly helps to be there from the get-go. But it does happen because a lot of times, hopefully through this podcast, they'll learn about us, but they'll have already started it and realize, I didn't realize that. Or a residential real estate person that's a friend of theirs, they'll help them. And it's, they do a great job in their field, but I mean, commercial and residential are 2 totally different animals.
Yeah.
And to be even more specific, healthcare is very, it's a very narrow vertical, and it's a great vertical. So it's just a matter of engaging at the front end if you can. But like I said, we absolutely will look at a deal. I was telling him I talked to a guy on the way up here that's already talked to a landlord and kind of gotten a way down the road. And I told him, I was like, look, hey, I'll take a look at it, pro bono, whatever, we'll take a look at it. And hopefully if he ends up going there in 5, 7, 10 years when he's ready to go, he'll remember me and say, hey, he helped me, and and we can grow our business that way as well.
So it's trickier, but I could bring you in.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the problems with bringing us in late is more than likely you've given a lot of information to the listing agent, to the landlord.
Played too many cards.
But here's what's interesting, the deal that I mentioned a minute ago where we recaptured over $100,000 more of concessions, that deal, nobody complained about me coming into that deal. The listing agent never said a cross word. The landlord, they knew, right? They knew. So I would take somebody at any stage. I would prefer to strategically set that up. Options is typically the way we negotiate. We don't go, asking a landlord to give concessions is great, but what's his motivation to give them? Because you're just asking for them and you're great and you're awesome. Like putting options in front of a listing agent to say, hey, put your best foot forward here. We're negotiating on 3 options and they're really good options. And that just causes them to really, work hard and fight hard with as many concessions as we can get to put the doctor in the best position we can.
So in terms of like rules of engagement, it's not like against the rules if I got partway into a deal and realized I'm stuck to call you guys. So I learned this the hard way.
I don't advise it.
Right.
There's a better way.
Yeah.
I know residential's different, but I learned my lesson on this. I tried to negotiate my own deal unrepresented. Got all the way to the end. The listing agent thought they were going to double dip. And And then at the end I went, oh, forgot to introduce you to my friend Lori. She is representing me.
Yeah.
She's doing my paperwork. The listing agent didn't love that one.
Yeah.
But
Right. Right.
oops, don't know what you don't know.
And that's why we're trying to get the word out, right?
Yeah.
You know, let's start at the beginning and make sure you have a smooth transition and a great experience, and you put you in the best position to succeed.
Cool.
Yeah. And we have a very specific strategy, so it helps if we can start at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's proven true year in, year out for many years now.
So you had talked about that example of leaving $100K of concessions on the table. What are some other scenarios, situations, examples? Maybe you have a story of a deal that was either really going sideways, and obviously we'll keep names, out of it, but I'm curious if you got any stories. Somebody called you on this is just not working. You see this thing going sideways. What was going sideways? And how were you guys able to remedy that? You guys have any stories or people you can think of?
Yeah.
I mean, $100K, that's
a lot of money, right?
It's a lot of money, especially.
So, strip center, brand new strip center attached to a Publix. A lot of times that's very attractive to dentist orthodontists because Publix has their demographic studies. And so it's usually a good bet. 2 different clients. One was an orthodontist, one was an optometrist. Going into the exact same space. One was represented by somebody else, and one was represented by Carr. The person represented by somebody else, it was a family friend, residential person. And so once everything was done and the doctors were in, they became friends. And so they were talking. And so they were kind of sharing some information to the tune of $275,000. The orthodontist, represented by Carr, got $275,000 more concessions than the person next door and got a bigger space.
Holy smokes.
And it was just because, we knew what we were doing. We knew the space, knew the landlord, and we're able to bring what we know and leverage our knowledge. And, look, we all share our information across the country. I mean, we have training videos every Monday and podcasts that we listen to. And so Dale and I talk all the time. So, like this, I love this because I'm learning from you as we're sitting here talking, So take all that knowledge and then, to answer that question, I mean, that's one example of, it's a lot, that's a big chunk over 10 years. Yeah.
There's startups that'll barely produce $275K in their first year.
Yeah, well, this is 275 over the term of over the 10
over the
year.
lease.
Yeah, over the lease, but still 275 that she didn't have to pay, in the exact same strip center.
Wow.
Exact same, next door, walls touching, demising wall touching, so.
I love metaphors and analogies. It's my favorite way to communicate. But I think that your guys' message would really resonate with this. It's like the difference in seeing a specialist versus not the specialist, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I'd say like going unrepresented into a deal like this would be like trying to do, mail-in DIY Smile Direct Club aligners.
Right. Yeah.
And going represented with especially somebody like Carr is like seeing a board-certified orthodontic specialist.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could get to the same result, but one of them's probably not going to be as high of quality.
Yeah.
One of them's going to take a heck of a lot longer.
Yeah.
One of them's going to be a little bit more stressful, but you can get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, are you shortcutting the time or putting the stress on your plate?
Yeah, and I think the downside... The downside to doing transactions is had this doctor not heard about me, he would have signed the lease and been perfectly happy and never known that he left
like out of sight, out of mind.
Left $100,000 on the table. So that's the downside of commercial real estate in this arena that we're talking about, because you don't know when you get a bad deal unless you can compare, and you can hardly compare those deals. It's hard to compare from a space down the street, depending on how old it is, versus new construction. They're all, so it's kind of hard to compare those deals. But yeah, it is important, very important to be represented and have a good strategy.
Yeah. After we had lunch together the other day, Luke and I looked at each other and we're like, we need these guys on the podcast. We have so many people that are probably just don't know what they don't know and leaving a lot of money on the table. And
absolutely,
our CEO started the company because of this very thing.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So he worked
very mission-driven.
Worked for a couple of landlords and went through some transactions with healthcare providers and really saw them in a really bad position, and that was the thing that sparked him to open the brokerage and to really go across the country and protect all these healthcare providers whose hearts are in the right place, who are taking care of our communities and doing the right stuff.
Would you say that most commercial real estate brokerages operate more like you guys, where you don't play in both scenarios, or is that something that people need to look out for, that like unfortunately most brokerages are playing on both courts?
That's something that you need to ask them if you engage them. Are you representing just us, or I mean, because if there's a building that they're listing and they've got a doctor and they're putting in the building that they're listing, I mean, so it's something you should ask. But as far as being healthcare specific, we're the largest healthcare specific commercial real estate company in the country.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we have a platform, like I said, anybody that's listening, as far as if they have, practices across several states, we have agents in all the states. And so we just signed a huge men's health group, over 1,000 locations across the country that that we're helping. So
I think one of the interesting things about that is if you can imagine having 35, 40 locations across the country, and you're going out and trying to do these transactions.
Yeah.
From broker to broker, all their documents look different. All their processes are different. They just, and you have to kind of try to sort through that, which is not easy to do. But when you come to us, we have local agents and brokers in each of those markets who have deep market knowledge. And all of our documents are the same. Our process is the same. It's very uniform. So going out and looking in 5 markets or 10 markets and having all those documents, it's really easy, or much easier, to sort through that than to sort through trying to figure out what they're trying to tell you in a spreadsheet, because you're looking at 5 different ones.
And not all leases are the same. There's a full service lease, triple net lease, modified gross lease, and so we help explain to our clients exactly what that is. And in some states, a full service is more popular. Some it's, modified gross. What does that mean? What does that mean to them? What does that mean they'll have to pay on top of that lease rate? Yeah. So we're able to show that all to them, show them exactly what their operating expenses, or not exactly what their operating expenses are, but what they have averaged over the past few years, so that they'll know. They won't go in blind. They'll know exactly at the end of the month, here's what I owe. Here's what I have to pay. So, and that's important when you're doing your cash flow.
Yeah. Amazing. I love it.
Important to have those, I'll circle back to important to have the local reps in those markets. I can't tell you the number of times that I knew of a property that was coming to market that was not to market. And, you get a little heads up on that, and it puts you in a position to get a client in a tight market. You don't get that. There's a lot of good brokerages out there, and there's some that transact all over the country.
Yeah.
But we believe that it is just really important to be in that market, have deep knowledge,
connections,
what's going on, what's happening there. Without having an agent that's local to the market, you're going to miss some of that, and especially in really tight markets, that's a really big deal.
And we form relationships with the listing agents as well. I mean, their goal is to fill their building for their client, and our goal is to put somebody in there, and if we put them in there with a longer term lease, successful, then so a lot, like to his point, a lot of them will call us and say, hey, this tenant's leaving. It's 2,500 square feet. It'd be perfect for a dentist based on or orthodontist from what you've told me. And so even before it's on the market, we can call if we know of somebody that's looking, say, hey, you need to look at this space. It's in that demographic, in that area that you wanted to be in, and it's going to be available come August or whatever it is. And so that's a fun part too. So and a lot of times they don't even think they want to move, but when you show them options and say, I can have a nicer space closer to my house and pay less, had no idea. So that's a fun part of it as well.
Curious if you guys got any other sprinkles on top, or?
I would just say build a team around you. Use you guys, build a good team around you, CPA, banker, consultant, and then a team that you trust, and then run your business, it'll run you, I mean, that's, I've been in small business ownership before and had some success, and then had some great failure too. So I'm real sensitive towards their needs because I've been there, done that, So my biggest advice was, seek guidance in people that are specialized in that particular area.
Yeah.
Like he said, build your team. Be sure you had trusted advisors, because that's really where the strength and power comes from.
Yeah.
It's hard just to go out to market and try to make something happen. Like if you don't know general contractors, and you don't know the right attorneys, and you don't have these vetted teams of people who, for instance, I know some general contractors that love change orders. They love them and they see them as an opportunity. And then I know GCs that fight really hard to bring reasonable solutions to issues when they arise, and they'll do a change order if necessary, but they try to figure other things out. That's one example.
And that have built orthodontic offices. That's not just, it's not any contractor can do it. Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, that have that experience. And so I think inside of our industry, there are those people who stay inside of our industry and do these projects and are experienced here, and they bring a ton of value to the table.
It's huge.
Yep.
So I know you guys are kind of local here in the Gulf area, but if somebody watching wanted to either connect with you guys or connect with Carr, what's the best way to do that?
Feel free to call us. Carr.us is our website.
Carr.us.
Carr, C-A-R-R, 2 R's.us. And if you go and said find an agent, you can pick the state that you're in, and it'll show all the agents, and then you can kind of go from there. Feel free to call us,
Cool.
email us. Would certainly, we're Carr, we're a team, so would love to point you in the right direction, depending on if you're in Louisiana, Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, wherever.
Del, what's your best email?
So my Carr email is Dell, D-E-L-L, .McCraney, M-C-C-R-A-N-E-Y, @Carr, C-A-R-R.us.
Cool. And Keith?
Keith Page, Keith, and then a period, Page, P-A-G-E, @Carr, C-A-R.us.
Awesome.
If somebody wants to reach out directly to us,
Oh, cool.
we'd love to make the introductions with other agents.
Sweet. That's what we would love is be able to build an audience where it's like, oh, I heard your podcast, and now there's a warm connection. And this whole episode, the intention here is really just helping people, saving them time, keeping them protected. So I think there's a lot of people that would like that mutual connection of I saw you, and
and if you are mid-market, or you're a larger organization with multi-sites, feel free to reach out to Keith and I both. We have national accounts, and his wife actually runs our national accounts platform.
Oh, perfect.
She's the director of national accounts.
She's the boss of me all the way around.
Awesome. Yeah, both in and out.
27 years, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's really awesome having you guys on the show. I think this is going to be a really good episode.
Much. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Really. This is like I said, not to sound like a broken record, but this is the hardest thing, is getting the message out there, because our guys are doing, our clients are doing the right stuff. And for us to be able to come and be a part of that, not only to protect them in transactions, but help them get through projects with vendors that are already vetted, not having to, kind of take a chance on somebody you don't know or somebody you heard was good. We see these vendor partners in action week in, week out. Yeah. And so just being able to provide that and be a part of that, and thank you guys for the exposure.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And just know for anybody listening, we met Del through a mutual friend, mutual client that he's actually done work for. So just know, it's not like we met you guys at a trade show and had a beer and we're like, hey, let's do this. We've seen the value being added and the transactions being done. So there is a mutual bridge there. It's not like we just met you off Craigslist one day,
Right.
Awesome.
Welcome to another episode of the Grow Ortho podcast. I'm filling in today for Luke. For those of you guys that don't know me, I'm Harrison Bagden, Senior Practice Advisor here at HIP. We got two awesome guys with us here today. We're going to be talking about commercial real estate, whether you're a first-time practice owner, whether you're looking to expand, whether we're talking about real estate ownership, leases. There is going to be a ton of topics and value that we're going to dive into today. So Del and Keith, we are super excited to have you guys on the show.